The 20th century was when Canada started to accomplish many great things as a country, such as becoming a global peacekeeper, a strong military force, and a rapidly improving country. However, there were also horrendous acts that are well hidden to the world. Here are the top 5 most low-light moments of the 20th century. The 5 criteria for selecting events in my topic were: it must have an impact, it must have been intended, how many people were affected, there must be severe consequences, and it must be a crime against humanity or a violation of human rights. The Oka Crisis was a 78-day standoff between July 11th to September 26th in 1990. It was between Mohawk protesters, the Sûreté de Québec, and the Canadian Army. In 1961, a 9-hole golf course was built on land claimed by the Mohawk of the Kanesatake Reserve. There was more planning for golf course expansion and the development of condominiums. Mohawk protesters constructed a barricade, and the golf course expansion was cancelled, at least for a while. The land was eventually purchased by the federal government, and the golf course eventually took place. Since the 18th century, the Mohawk had been pressing the government to recognize their right to land in the area. However, their requests were largely ignored. The government failed our people, encouraging the silencing of the Indigenous community of Canada and cultural genocide by taking away their land. The Sexual Sterilization Act of Alberta was enacted in 1928 by the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. It allowed for sterilization of persons carrying unwanted genes, which included Aboriginals, the mentally disabled, criminals, and prostitutes. Eugenics, which came into popularity during the late 19th century, was about improving the human race. Eugenicists believed that natural selection was insufficient, and they wanted to influence human evolution by weeding out undesirables. In 1928, a eugenics board was created to recommend sterilization as a condition for release from a mental health institution. This was to ensure that the danger of procreation with its risk of multiplication of the evil by transmission of the disability to progeny were eliminated. A change in 1937 permitted the sterilization of so-called mental defectives without their consent. They also targeted other minority groups. Canada's mindset of not wanting to get itself participating in turmoil of other countries and lack of responses in expansion of German, Italian, and Japanese all contribute to the isolationist attitudes throughout World War II. Canada opposed Article X of the League of Nations, which required it to become involved in conflicts from other countries. In 1935, Mussolini and Italy invaded Abyssinia. The Canadian delegate to the League of Nations proposed a boycott on trade with Italy that includes Canadian oil, as Italy needed oil for its war machines. However, this suggested boycott was rejected in Canada. Catholic Canadians had sympathy for Italy because it was the home for the Pope. In 1936, the Spanish Civil War began. However, yet again, Canada made a law making it illegal for Canadians to join a foreign army, therefore making it illegal for Canadians to help out another country in need. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, motivated more hatred in British Columbians against Japanese Canadians, and on March of 1942, the British Columbia Security Commission, in charge of internment, decided that all male Japanese Canadians 18 or older would be sent to road camp, separating them from their families to perform forced labor. Some men who protested due to relocation from their families ended up at prison camps, and some men were moved to prison camps for being accused of sympathizing with the Japanese military. Between 1943 to 1946, the Canadian government sold all Japanese Canadian property, which included houses, cars, boats, businesses, and personal property. Most Japanese Canadian men above the age of 18 were already sent to road camps, leaving mainly women and children behind to go to the internment camps at deserted areas such as Hope, BC, and the Kootenay Mountains. often kept in buildings meant for livestock. They experienced harsh living conditions and a loss of freedom. At the end of the war, the Japanese Canadians that had been previously living in internment camps were given two options by William Lyon Mackenzie King: be deported back to a war-devastated Japan, or to move east of the Rocky Mountains, where they would have to rebuild their whole lives as all Japanese Canadian-owned property was sold while they were in internment camps. None is too many was the response given by a high-level Canadian government official when asked how many Jews should be accepted into the country during the time of the Nazi persecution of the Jews. The government of William Lyon Mackenzie King saw the acceptance of large numbers of Jewish immigrants as a threat to Canadian society. It was widely believed that Jews would not conform to the laws of the land or would change their cultural and religious beliefs in order to become a part of Canadian society. In his diary, Mackenzie King said, "The admission of refugees perhaps posed a greater menace to Canada in 1938 than did Hitler." An example of the atrocities committed by Canadian government due to these hateful and discriminatory views on Jewish people: on May 15, 1939, the luxury ocean liner SS St. Louis set sail from Hamburg, Germany. On board were 907 Jewish passengers. They had previously been the upper class of German society prior to being stripped of all their assets by the Nazi government. However, they did possess entry visas to Cuba. Once reaching their destination at Havana, they were turned away, as the Cuban government refused to recognize the visas. Many countries in South America had refused to allow the Jewish passengers of the SS St. Louis sanctuary, and as the St. Louis made its way north, the United States sent out a gunship to shadow the cruise ship to ensure that it did not enter American waters. When word of the cruise ship arrived to William Lyon Mackenzie King, he responded saying that he was emphatically opposed to the admission of the St. Louis's passengers. Immigration Minister Frederick Blair stated that these refugees did not qualify under immigration laws, and in any case Canada had already done too much for these Jews. He said, "If these Jews were to find a home in Canada, they would likely be followed by other shiploads. No country could open its doors wide enough to take in the hundreds of Jewish people who want to leave Europe. The line must be drawn somewhere." And those are my top 5 most low-light moments in Canadian history in the 19th century.